Bienvenue. Welcome once again to another live stream. This is the Karen Bashford show, or perhaps we should rename it the Sloth or Beaver show. I'm not entirely sure, but I'm very pleased that we can be here together. We are talking about a topic which at first sight doesn't appear contentious, but in my mind is purely because of the almost diametrically opposed opinions I commonly get when I'm talking to therapists about how to deal with this. So today's topic is, he says, bringing it up, own your story, shape your future, and consciously choose your life path, managing your thoughts and actions. Welcome to the show, Karen.
Thank you.
So we were talking in the green room, and I'm gonna highlight some of what you said, because I always like to get my head into the right frame before we start talking, because otherwise Karen sends me off on a thought process that sometimes means I have to sit back and think for a while. But okay, so there appears to be two diametrically opposite schools of thought, one of which says you need to forensically break apart all the events of your past that led up to this moment now so you can understand yourself better. That often means revisiting trauma, getting through that, working through it, so that you become a better formed person because you're fully aware where your past comes. And the other one says draw a line in front of those traumas, and deal with what's just in front of you. Don't look too far in the future and just deal with the here and now. And what Karen says is slightly different from that. Karen, talk me through.
Okay, well, I'm sorry. I never, ever agree to going back into trauma. It's the worst thing, as far as I'm concerned, you can do, because all you're doing is taking the person back into those feelings, those emotions, the memories that, again, re-trigger trauma or actually can create new trauma. So why would you want to do that?
Well, I know a friend of mine who went through terrible traumas, and when she went into therapy, that's one of the first things they tried to do is take her back to where it was. Can you revisit those times? And it's like, why would you put yourself back in harm's way?
You wouldn't want to, and it's the last thing you want to do, because why would you want to go back into your memories of things that were so unbelievably painful for you? Why would you want to do that? But at the same time, I don't agree that you should just draw a line under trauma and just move on, because everything that happens in our life, whether it's traumatic or just a very enjoyable experience, has something that we can take from it that will enable us to move forward. We are always learning.
But also our current character is informed by all those experiences, right?
Yes. So how can we possibly know who we are and understand our actions, our decisions, our choices, even our behavior, if we never bother to look at what's happened in the past and acknowledge that those actions, those decisions, even those beliefs we created are still influencing us now, which in turn means that we're making decisions or going into relationships based on information, experiences that we've had in our past that might no longer be relevant because they're based on experiences that hurt us sometimes, that actually cause us tremendous pain that is still remaining in our body.
Also, I think sometimes when your trauma has been developed during a time, for instance, when you're a child and when you're still growing, that the influences and the effects of your surroundings could be completely different interpreted then as now. So
Absolutely.
if you look back on that with adult eyes on imprints that you drew with pre-adolescent ones, the reactions can be quite different, right?
Totally, yeah. And if you consider, we start learning and experiencing in the womb. So something that could have happened in our mother's womb could still be influencing us now.
Right.
And I know, working with the clients I've worked with, that has been the case, that they had experiences in the womb that are still very much part of their memories and their belief system that they've been utilizing up until they actually worked with me and realized just how much it was influencing their lives.
Also, if you add on to the fact that of epigenetics, so trauma that is visited upon the mother will be there. Then when a child is born, genetically linked back to that previous generational trauma. Now I know that is an up and coming and existing discussion that has been had on a number of channels, including this one.
Yeah. And we just do not realize that even though we don't necessarily believe in past lives, as a soul, we bring through soulful memories. So something that's happened in a past life can still be playing out now, but unless you explore your past, you're not necessarily going to know that. I worked with a client that had a horrendous shoulder pain. It wasn't until we started exploring where that shoulder pain originated from did she realize it was actually a wound from a previous life where she'd actually been stabbed and the trauma was still within her body from that previous life. Now, it sounds amazing, absolutely unbelievable for some people, but we do not know what we store in our subconscious from our lives. And I say lives, I don't mean just this life, our lives. So yeah,
I guess when you think that the DNA chain contains a ton of information, 95% of which we don't know what it is or where it is, within that, that's probably a bunch of memories and reactions and so on to events that have happened through our derivation. So that's, I guess, genetic linkage there. Okay, so let's talk about the topic then, because what you wanted to talk about specifically was self-leadership and about owning your story. Can you explain what that means? I understand what you mean by shaping your future, because that means almost taking action to make sure that your future is as you want it. But owning your story and self-leadership, can you give me some more flesh on the bone?
Well, if you consider, if we aren't aware where we've created our beliefs, our habits, our behaviors, our thought patterns, how are we going to therefore be the leader of our own lives? Because we are actually just allowing everything we've learned or experienced rather than learned, and it could be learned obviously because of what we learn at school and what we're taught by parents and such like. But how can we lead ourselves if something else is still influencing our decisions? Self-leadership is very much about knowing yourself, knowing your own choices, rather than relying on something you were told or, an impression you were given, or even something that's been passed down through the family history. Because if you look back and look at your own family, you are doing things that relate specifically to what your parents are doing. But is that really you, or are you just copying your parents?
That's an interesting one. I think we all unconsciously copy whoever had the most influence on us, and that's often is a parental figure, or it could be someone that we absolutely I looked up to, we're in awe of. I remember there was a physics teacher in my school that I was never friendly with, but I was kind of in awe of him, and I know that to this day, I use some of the phrasings and some of the things he said because I thought they were so strong. So yes, I think you're right. Absolutely.
So if you are still using some of his phrasing,
yes,
that doesn't mean it's wrong, but at the same time, is it really your thoughts? Is it really your choice?
Yeah. Well, he was only misquoting from someone else, so it's a second level.
Yeah,
But yes, but I thought it was relevant because it basically it was a quote from Sansu, a Japanese warlord, funny enough, who said the journey of 1,000 steps starts with but a single one. And it was basically a way of getting me off my tuchus to get started and getting on with something, because you got to take the first step to get on with it. And I think that's still valid.
It's very true. It's still very valid, but sometimes it's statements that aren't really relevant anymore that will your take on those statements.
Yeah.
Because just because it's somebody's statement doesn't mean to say it's relevant for you.
Yes. Yeah, you're probably right, actually, and you probably outgrow things as well, concepts and ideas that seem so important in your teens, in your formative years, etc. Now seem either petty or not relevant anymore, as you quite say. You kind of outgrow those ideas, and I think it's probably important to reconcile the fact that you've outgrown those ideas. I think it's probably because when you start in life, you live in a kind of blinkered field. You see what you're allowed to see from your parents, your teachers, and your school, and whatever. And then it starts to gradually, well, not for everyone, but it starts to gradually widen. So eventually, you're taking influences from all sorts of people. Like with you, I didn't have an idea on half the things that I'm now interested in before you and I started talking, and now I look at things in slightly different angle, and perhaps I'm more questioning than I was before. And I think being more questioning is also a mode of maturation, because as you mature, you get the urge to find out the hidden depths to things. In some cases, maybe you don't. Maybe you double down and say, "No, I just want a quiet, shallow life." And in some ways, sorry, here I am having a self-exploratory session here. I hope you guys don't mind for a second, indulging me. But some people would rather stay in the comfort of knowledge. It's what they say, isn't it? That when ignorance is bliss, 'tis folly to be wise. If you don't know about the terrible stuff and you don't acknowledge that exists, then you can't be affected by it.
But the thing about our minds is, especially our subconscious mind, it buries things. So a client that I worked with was not aware that she'd been, I've mentioned this previously, raped by her grandfather. She wasn't aware of that because it was so traumatic for her. She buried it. But the influence it had over her life was horrendous. That is why we need to own our own story. Because unless we know, yes, it was a horrendous thing for her to discover. However, in discovering it, she was actually able to understand why she did so many things. She was able to forgive herself, not necessarily him, but herself, for not accepting that it wasn't her fault. Because as a child, she took it on as her fault. So consequently, every time she did something, she would automatically think, oh, it's my fault. I'm the naughty one. I'm the one that encouraged this and things like that. Even as a young child, we automatically do it. Parents get divorced, and quite often you'll find the children blaming themselves because parents have got divorced. But it's nothing to do with the children. It's everything to do with the parents. But the children take the blame on. Now imagine carrying that for the rest of your life. It's my fault. I'm to blame. How is that going to influence your life?
I would have thought it would hold you back in so many ways. Also,
So
it would ruin any possibility of close interpersonal relationships, because you're constantly assuming that at some point you're going to do something which is going to cause it to separate, or because it was your fault. Oh, good Lord.
So that's what I mean by owning your own story and actually investigating your past.
And that's a beautiful segue. That's a beautiful segue, because we want to talk about this with relevance to Sloth or Beaver. Sloth or Beaver is an amazing toolkit that Karen has put together based around a board and a number of sets of cards. And on each card, there are questions designed to elicit a response that is not necessarily refacing old trauma, but more of finding the truth of your purpose and of why you react to things in a certain way. Can you give me an example of one of those questions?
Well, let's just pull one from the relationships. This is just relationships.
And before we do that, there are how many different packs?
6. There's 6 different topics.
Would you just list all the topics?
Yeah, there's life, there's money mindset, there's health, there's intimate relationships, business, and relationships.
All right, go.
Relationship is, what does loyalty mean to you? Is it standing by somebody no matter what, or knowing when to walk away for your own well-being? Loyalty can be a beautiful act of love, but when tied to fear, guilt, or obligation, it can feel more like self-betrayal. True loyalty starts with being honest with yourself. Are you loyal because it aligns with your values, or because you're afraid to let go?
Ooh. It's very comforting to stay with the old thoughts, isn't it?
Absolutely. But do the old thoughts serve you?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, you see, here's the thing. If the old thoughts make you comforted because they're old and because they remind you of perhaps a simpler time, yeah, I know people that will stick with those old thoughts because they remind them of comfortable nights beside the fire, sitting there while her mother was knitting, asking her father questions and him giving simple answers and her being comforted by that, even though it turns out at a later date not to have been the entire truth. You know? Oh, it's
so if we get too comfortable with ourselves, where are we ever going to grow?
We won't grow.
Because we grow through fear. We grow through actually taking risk. And if we're going to stay comfortable with what we have, are we ever going to really grow? Are we ever going to see our true potential?
Well, that's a very good question. How could we? We couldn't.
We can't.
No. So, ladies and gentlemen, you notice I put the ticker on the bottom. It says Sloth or Beaver. Slotholbeaver.com, a great place to go and find out more about Sloth or Beaver. There you'll see renditions of both the board and also the different packs of cards. They all come in different organza bags, different colors, according to different chakras, which is really lovely, all different colors to match that. And they cover different areas that Karen and we spoke about. Now, I've also put up a QR code in the corner. If you scan that, will also take you to Sloth or Beaver. And I encourage you to do so, if only to educate yourself as to what there is out there, because this is a great toolkit. And it's not only that, but it's also, I think, in many ways, every family that wants to discover more about how each other relates to each other and what they truly feel and how they can grow together more effectively, this would be a great way to propel that further forward, because you can ask each other questions that, I mean, you don't have to answer them all, but if you do, it could cause greater internal cohesion. You all feel like you're all pulling in the same direction in that boat. You know, because taking that analogy still further, if everybody else has got an oar and they're pulling in a different direction, you'll just go around in circles. But if you're pulling the same direction, you will actually move forward in a direction. Karen, as ever, eye-opening and giving me multiple pause for thought. One last question. If a therapist is watching this show now, why would Sloth or Beaver be a useful addition to their existing toolkit?
We don't know all the answers. We don't know all the questions. And basically, Sloth or Beaver has provided in each pack 52 questions. So there's 52 questions that you could ask a client that perhaps you wouldn't have thought of yourself, or perhaps it's worded in a way that is different to what you would have approached it at. So consequently, you're not only giving the client your input, but you're providing additional input, which could be a different approach that they need to getting an answer that they've been struggling with.
I think it's an incredible way forward. And I want to thank you so much for bringing this. I have a copy myself. We're already now had 6 sessions so far. So far, so good. It's caused a couple of times for me to stop dead in my tracks and think I hadn't thought of that. But that's not a bad. But that's not a bad thing, you know. It's caused no tears as yet. It's caused a moment where it made my wife stop talking altogether for a full 5 minutes while she gathered her thoughts and came back to me with something. But you know what?
That's what it's about. That's what it's all about.
That's what it's all about. Thank you so much for this. And to all of you out there, this is a wonderful time of year to be thinking about that terrible thing with the sea, the Christmas time. And I would say if you want to give your family something that could really shift the balance positively, then this could be something for you. It's easily purchased directly off the website. The base setup is £75, and that includes a 1-pack, but there are all the other 5 packs to choose from, each of which I think are £25 a pop.
Yes.
And they're excellent. I would heartily recommend it. And there are going to be a couple of testimonials viewable fairly soon on the website, which I think will display just that. So I want to wish you all a wonderful week ahead. Please keep your feet on the ground. Keep reaching for the stars. Who knows, you might catch the moon. And try and look after that mental health. Until next week, goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.